Howdy folks, welcome back to Mingles with Jingles, episode 37, and the first Mingles with Jingles of 2014. I hope you all had a great Christmas, and you're having a fantastic new year. I certainly did. Took a break. There's been a 2-week gap since the last Mingles with Jingles. Took a break over the Christmas holidays. Well, I say I took a break, but you know what I'm like. I said don't expect a video every day, and you didn't get a video every day, but you got a video almost every day, and some days you got 2 videos. I just got bored. It's actually because I do this for fun. If I wasn't doing it for a job, I would be doing it anyway. I enjoy putting videos up, and not having the pressure to put a World of Tanks or a War Thunder video up every day allowed me a little bit of freedom in that I could pretty much put up whatever I liked, and you got the kind of World of Tanks or War Thunder videos that I normally wouldn't put up, like the trolling in the TU2, for example, in War Thunder, which was only a couple of minutes long, and it's the sort of, if I was sticking to my regular schedule and I put that kind of video up, I would feel as if I owed you another video as well, because that one was just so short. But because I was technically taking a break, I had the freedom to do that sort of thing without feeling guilty about it. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the content that I did put up while I was taking a break from YouTube, because I had a lot of fun doing that sort of video, instead of the regular kind of World of Tanks compilations or trying to find a theme for the War Thunder videos that I was putting up. And it was fun just to have the pressure taken off and be able to just upload what I wanted. So there's that. Speaking of video compilations, the new series I'm doing for World of Tanks, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, does seem to be quite popular, which is good because I have no plans to stop doing them. There will be more good, bad and ugly videos coming up, hopefully for a good long time. But that brings me on to a subject which I have to keep raising every now and then, and Mingles with Jingles seems like a good place to do it, and that's submitting your replays to me. If you've had a game that you think is suitable, then by all means send me the replay file. Numerous different ways of doing it. There's the email address, which I use for World of Tanks submissions, but people also put links to World of Tanks replays files in the comments to various different videos. They send me YouTube PMs, they send me PMs over the World of Tanks forum, any number of different ways that are available for getting my attention. However, you need to realise that I get thousands of these emails. Literally, I'm not exaggerating, thousands. And this is strictly a one-man operation. I'm not one of these big YouTube channels that can afford to hire a staff of people to filter the emails and monitor the comments on the videos. I do it all myself, and there are only so many hours available in the day. So while you are welcome to send replays in, the chances of me actually getting to see it are pretty slim. And that I'm not even attempting to reply to all of the emails and PMs and so on that I get every day. There are just too many of them. So you're welcome to continue sending your replays in, but do not be surprised if they don't end up being shown. On a sort of related issue, I mentioned in the last Mingles with Jingles about the Facebook contest that I ran. Dave Lister had a code for a Panzer IIJ, the premium German Tier 3 light tank. And we decided we were going to run a caption contest on Facebook and give away the prize to whoever got the most thumbs ups on their caption comment. And again, in the last Mingles with Jingles, a lot of you raised some very valid concerns about how it wasn't the best way to run that sort of contest, and you were absolutely right, but time was an issue. We needed to get things done quickly. There was a deadline. The code expired on the 1st of January. I am not going to be running contests like that on Facebook anymore, and not just for the reasons that everybody brought up in the comments on Facebook and on the YouTube videos and so on about running something like that on Facebook, and not because a lot of people don't like using Facebook, but because of what happened to the guy who won. Dave Ball won the caption contest, and what happened on Facebook was when I announced that Dave Ball had won, within minutes some scumbag had cloned Dave Ball's Facebook page done an exact copy of his Facebook page, PM'd me from this cloned page, claimed the code, and then sent me PMs laughing about it. It literally stole the prize. And it's just too easy to do that sort of thing on Facebook, and too difficult for me to check that the guy I'm giving the prize away to is actually the guy who won. So Dave got robbed of his Panzer IIJ. To attempt to compensate him, I did send him a gift package through the World of Tanks gift shop of 2,000 gold and 2 million credits, but it's not much of a compensation. So now I don't want to waste time blabbing on about the technical details of why, when you have a Facebook page set up as an organisation rather than as an individual person, it's very difficult for you to directly contact people who make comments on your Facebook page. But because of the way the Mighty Jingles Facebook page is set up, it is just too difficult for me to verify that the people who are claiming the prizes are the actual people who have won the prizes. And so for that reason, as well as for all reasons that everybody complained about my running a contest on Facebook, I will not be doing any more Facebook contests in the future. It's just too easy to be scammed and for the wrong person to end up stealing the prize. So my apologies to Dave Ball, and my apologies to everybody who wasn't able to take part in the Facebook contest because it was on Facebook, but it won't be happening again. I'll definitely be taking much more secure steps for organising that sort of contest in the future. So my apologies to everybody concerned for that disastrous Panzer IIJ contest on Facebook. In slightly better news, I don't know how many of you watched the live stream I did recently with Rita Gamer. She's a girl World of Tanks player. Ooh, wow, yes, they do exist, and she's really, really good. She recently managed to get herself, well, I say managed to get herself, Silent Stalker, the guy who runs the For the Record blog, which most of you know about, and if you don't know about, link in the video description down below. Highly recommend it. Fantastic source of information on all things World of Tanks. He has adopted Rita as the official live stream of the For the Record blog. And I had played with Rita before, but it was about 6 months ago, you know, before she was famous. And she asked me to join her for a live stream again as a surprise to her viewers, who had been asking for it for a long time apparently. And I had a fantastic time. Now, don't get me wrong, I love playing with Quickie Baby, I love playing with Circumflexes. Circumflexes is funny as hell, and Quickie Baby is an amazing professional, right? They're both really, really good in their own way. But I don't know what it was about playing with Rita, I just felt as if all the pressure was off. And I had a fantastic night playing with her, and I hardly raged at all. And which disappointed a lot of people. They were like, no Jingles rage, what's going on? Who are you? What are you doing with the real Jingles? And I know what it was. I don't know what it was about playing with Rita, but I was just chilled. Well, not the whole night, you know, I did lose my rag on a couple of occasions. We got some absolutely monstrously bad teams where we were fighting for our lives, for example, trying to give the team time to cap, and then they just didn't cap. And we ended up losing. You know what it's like, it's World of Tanks. But I found she was a real calming influence on me, and I wasn't losing my temper the way I generally do when I'm playing World of Tanks and things are going badly. And for some reason, it just seemed to raise my game, and consistently was in the top 3 damage done, even when we weren't top tier. I'd had a fantastic night playing with her, and I think the fact that I was playing with a woman rather than, you know, some other guys was probably a bit of a calming influence on me. I watched my language because there were ladies present. And it seemed to have a very, very positive effect on my gameplay. Now, I'm not saying there's going to be a regular live stream with Rita every week, because I already do 2 live streams with Quickie, you know, one with Quickie Baby, one with Circumflexes, and then once a month there's the Dream Team company battles. And I really can't afford to be spreading myself too thin. But I'm definitely going to be playing with Rita again. I had a fantastic time playing with her. I'll be putting a video up soon of some of the games that we played. One game in the Centurion 7-1 in particular, which was amazing. And And so, yeah, basically, I will be playing with Rita again. She certainly seemed to enjoy having me along, and I had a great time playing with her. So while it is not going to be a regular weekly live stream, I'm definitely going to try to get a few more games in on a semi-regular basis. I did announce the live stream on Facebook, but if you missed it, then you can see the video highlights of the live stream on Rita's Twitch page. She also has a Facebook. Sorry, she also has a YouTube page. Links all in the video description. Highly recommend you go along and have a look. She's a great girl. She's a great player, and I had immense fun playing with her, and I'm really looking forward to doing it again. Anyway, on with a selection of questions from the last episode of Mingles with Jingles. The first one comes from Crap Hunter, and he wants to know, Jingles, with the introduction of software like Tank Inspector, do you think tank reviews are going to become irrelevant, as pretty much everybody can now look up the stats of any vehicle that they wish? First of all, if you don't know what Crap Hunter's talking about, there's a new piece of software that I now am using for my tank reviews. It's called Tank Inspector, and it's a fantastic... the link in the video description, again, as always, the video description is going to be crowded this week. Basically, it allows you to look at the armour models of the various different tanks, and it shows you the stats of various different tanks in much, much greater detail than you get from browsing a tank in the garage in World of Tanks itself. I do recommend this software. I think it's really, really good. Has it rendered video reviews of tanks irrelevant? I don't think so, and for a number of reasons. First and foremost, while yes, I do try to pack my tank reviews as full of information as I possibly can, they're not just there for informational purposes, they're there for entertainment as well. You get the gameplay of the tanks. And that's important because if you were to look at my IS-6 review as a perfect example, just looking at the paper stats of something in the garage or even in software like Tank Inspector doesn't really tell you everything you need to know about the machine. The IS-6, for example, when that thing was first introduced, I thought, oh, new tank, new premium, let's have a look. And I checked out the stats and I saw the thickness of the armour and I thought, this thing's rubbish. The armour's terrible. And it's not the thickness of the armour that makes the IS-6 a good tank. And you really do have to play the thing to understand the difference between the paper stats, which are not that impressive, and the actual armour angling and sloping and how effective it really, really is when you take the thing out into a battle. And while you can get a hint of that sort of thing from looking at something's stats in a program like Tank Inspector, you really need to drive the tank in order to experience what it is really like. And you can't do that by looking at a bunch of stats. Now, make no mistake about it, Tank Inspector is a very, very useful tool, but it's no substitute for actually getting into the tank, driving it, and showing people how the thing plays. You can use things like Tank Inspector to give you an idea of how you should probably be driving the tank, but then you need to put that into practice, and the only way to do that is to get into the tank and press the battle button. So yeah, Tank Inspector is great, and I do highly recommend people use it if they're interested in, the information behind the scenes, if you like, on how the various different tanks in World of Tanks work. But it's no substitute for actually driving the tank yourself. Getting that hands-on experience that you just don't get when you're looking at a bunch of numbers in the garage. And of course, particularly where premium tanks are concerned, grabbing a hold of the thing and driving it is a very expensive way of finding out whether or not you're actually going to enjoy driving the thing. And so that's where, the value of YouTube video tank reviews comes in, where people like me, who do have far too much money to throw around, can spend the money and try the thing out for you. And then, based on what you've seen in our videos, you can make the decision for yourself whether or not you think the tank that we're showcasing is going to be worth the investment for you. And if you're considering making the investment, and these tier 8 premiums in particular are quite a substantial investment, right? They're not cheap. You probably want to see a little bit more than just some guy looking over some stats pages in a garage or a Tank Inspector software before you're going to be convinced to put your money down. And so, no, I don't think video reviews are ever going to go out of fashion, regardless of the complexity of the software, like Tank Inspector, that becomes available to help us do those videos. And that's what they are. They're there as tools to make the review more detailed, more complex, and more accurate, rather than to replace the review entirely. Or at least that's how I see it. Lewis Cotterill is 17 years old and he's thinking about joining the Royal Navy. Since I obviously have some experience of what that's like, he wanted to know, in my opinion, what the advantages were of joining the Navy as opposed to the Army or the Air Force. Well, for me, the chief advantage of being in the Navy was that even when you're in a combat zone, deployed on active operational duty, you get 3 hot meals a day cooked in a proper kitchen by Navy chefs, and you get to sleep in a bunk every night. Of course, the downside is that when you're not deployed on active operations, you get to eat 3 hot meals a day cooked by Navy chefs. And you have to sleep in this tiny, cramped little bunk every night. But yeah, the accommodation arrangements, if you're in the Navy, are definitely one of the plus sides, because there are soldiers deployed right now in Afghanistan and Iraq, sleeping in roadside bivouacs, who dream of getting a hot meal every day, let alone 3 hot meals every day, and sleeping, with laundered, fresh, clean sheets. It's just, so yeah, you've got to put that sort of thing into perspective. That's definitely one of the benefits of being deployed in the Navy. Also, you do get to visit, all over the world. I have been everywhere in the Navy: Africa, the Middle East, America, Europe, the Mediterranean, you name it. And you spend a couple of weeks at sea, and then you've got a weekend or 3 or 4 days or anything up to a week in a foreign port somewhere, and you're basically being paid to travel the world. There are far worse ways of earning a living. The Navy definitely has better travel opportunities than the other 2 services. If you want to get out, see a bit of the world, without the risk of being shot at that you get in the Army, then the Navy is definitely the way to go. I mean, in one 6-month Mediterranean deployment, I don't know, I must have visited 14 different countries. And, in the space of one deployment, we'd been to Israel, Malta, Crete, Cyprus, Italy, France, Morocco, Egypt, seen the pyramids, went to Jerusalem, swam in the Dead Sea, went scuba diving in Crete, went on a tour of the vineyards around Barcelona, went to Venice, had a cappuccino in the exact same cafe that Indiana Jones was sitting at in the 3rd Indiana Jones movie in St. Mark's Square in Venice. And all the time we were doing this, we were being paid for the privilege of going there. There are far, far worse ways to spend your time. So yeah, the opportunities for travel in the Navy are definitely one of the major perks, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time. Next question. It's a War Thunder question this time. It's from Gabriel Buenrostro, and I may have even pronounced his name correctly. He wants to know, and I do get this question quite a lot, and it may seem like a fairly basic question, but if people keep asking it, then obviously people need to know the answer. Wants to know, what's the significance of gun convergence and vertical targeting in War Thunder? Right, it's actually pretty simple. Vertical targeting is the target lead indicator that you get in arcade battles. With vertical targeting on, compensates for bullet drop. Simple as that. The projectiles that your weapons fire are affected by gravity, and over distance they will start to drop. It's more complicated than that because of the way the ballistics of the bullets work. They tend to rise over shorter distances and drop over longer distances, but all you need to know is that with vertical targeting on, your gun indicator will compensate and accurately point your guns towards the right part of the target to take into account the fact that gravity is affecting the projectiles that your guns are firing. Now, it does start to get tricky when you're firing cannons and machine guns at the same time, or when you're firing, for example, some of the Russian aircraft, like the MiG-15. has a 37mm and 23mm cannons, and your gun sight is only accurate for the heaviest caliber of ammunition that you're firing. So if you're firing cannons and machine guns, like, for example, some of the Spitfires, the target indicator is purely for the cannon. You'll notice when you're firing cannons and machine guns, the target indicator is in one position. The cannons run out of ammo, suddenly all you're doing is firing the machine guns, and the target indicator jumps to a different position. What that's doing is it's going cannons, 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 cannons are empty, and it readjusts the target indicator for the ballistic properties of the machine guns that you're firing. What that means is when you're firing cannons and machine guns at a target, only your cannon fire is going to be 100% accurate if you're aiming at the target lead indicator, right? Because the ballistics of the machine guns that you're firing are different, and it can't give you two different target indicators. So you need to bear that in mind. Now, as for gun convergence, what that is that the weapons on an aircraft, and this is of particular importance for wing-mounted weapons, gun convergence is not such an issue for weapons mounted in the nose of an aircraft because they're all firing from the same point in the same direction anyway. But wing-mounted weapons, well, if you look at the wingspan of an aircraft, you know, for example, the 420mm Hispano cannons on a Mark 5C Spitfire, right? They're actually mounted fairly far apart, and the armourers would set the guns so that the shots would converge, i.e. meet a certain distance in front of the aircraft, and this was your sweet spot, this was your kill zone. So I tend to set my guns for 300 meters convergence, which means that at a range of 300 meters, if I'm firing at a target, I know that all four of my cannons are going to be hitting the target at the same time. So what's going to happen if you're firing at a target that isn't exactly 300 meters away, assuming your gun convergence is set to 300 meters? Well, if he's closer than 300 meters, then where your guns are actually aiming at is a point in front of the aircraft that you're shooting at. If he is further than 100 meters away, what's going to happen is that your guns are going to converge at that 300 meter point and then start to spread. The shots are going to start to spread out again. So with guns set to 300 meters, you're shooting at a target 600 meters away. What's probably going to happen is that your shots are actually going to go to either side of him without hitting him. So this is a particular issue and something that you do need to be aware of for aircraft that have the weapons mounted in the wings. Nose-mounted cannons, for example, on the BF-109s, the Yak-9s, aircraft like that, not such an issue. All you need to really worry about is vertical targeting, bullet drop, because nose-mounted weapons fire straight ahead. It's the wing-mounted weapons that this is an issue for. Another issue, of course, is the actual angling of the aircraft. Let's say, for example, that I'm on the tail of another aircraft who is exactly 300 meters away from me. My gun convergence is set to 300 meters. Let's say it's a bomber, and I'm aiming for his engines. If he's flying straight and level, but I'm coming in banked at an angle of 30 degrees, what could be happening in that case is that some of my shots are going above and some are going below his wings, because I'm not at exactly the same attitude as him. And you'll get this a lot if you're coming in on a dive, for example, in a boom and zoom aircraft like Corsair, again with wing-mounted weapons, and you're coming in high and from the rear, and the guy sees you and starts pulling away and banking to the right. You need to try to have your aircraft at the same attitude as him, because if he's banked 30 degrees to the right, you want to, as best as possible, also bank your aircraft 30 degrees to the right so that your guns are lined up with the silhouette of his wings. Because if you've, again, gun convergence set to 300 meters and you're not exactly 300 meters away from him, some of those shots are going to go wide. And if you're not at the same attitude as him, there's nothing for those shots to hit. Whereas if you're at the same attitude as the aircraft that you're shooting at, if those shots go wide, well, his wings are in the way. So there's all sorts of things that you need to try to keep in mind to make the best possible use of whatever range your gun convergence is set at when you're playing War Thunder. It's actually surprisingly complicated, and there is a lot to keep track of. Anyway, moving on. Has anybody seen the new ASAP video that is out for World of Tanks, with specifically things like destructible scenery, turrets flying off tanks that have been ammo racked and remaining in the game as physical objects that can block shots and you can take cover behind. All sorts of things like that. Talking about, at long last, historical battles coming in with uneven sides. So, for example, 3 Tigers against 15 T-34s, games like that. All kinds of new different game modes, and the Havoc physics engine being incorporated into the game, all this good stuff, which they've been threatening to introduce in some cases for years, but are finally getting around to it in the next major content patch for World of Tanks. Now, I'm not saying that Wargaming never had plans to introduce all of this new stuff that's coming soon into World of Tanks, but does anybody else find the timing suspicious? You know, ground forces for War Thunder is in testing. The non-disclosure agreement has been partially lifted. YouTube has been flooded with gameplay footage of tanks in War Thunder, and it's mostly been positive. And suddenly Wargaming are announcing all this new stuff that they've had on the back burner for a long time in World of Tanks. Historical battles in particular. I was doing our own historical battles in World of Tanks, player-organised private battles, years ago. And Wargaming had expressed an interest in what we were doing, and they were monitoring quite closely the progress that we were making in trying to simulate historical tank battles using, you know, the game engine of World of Tanks as it was back then. But it just seemed like the guys that were enthusiastic about what we were doing in historical battles didn't really have much power to make any changes, or the game engine, if you like, prior to physics being introduced, just wasn't really suitable for, you know, whatever reason. They talked a lot about how they wanted to introduce historical battles, and this was 2 years ago, and nothing happened until now. And I don't think this is a bad thing. I think it seems to me undeniably the case that Wargaming are, I'm not going to say worried about War Thunder, because they are still 2 very different kinds of tank games. I definitely believe that they don't occupy the same niche. World of Tanks is still very much an arcade tank game. War Thunder, while also being an arcadey kind of tank game, is a lot more realistic. And which one you're going to prefer is going to come down to personal preference. Personally, I love them both, and I don't see any reason why they can't coexist, because they do occupy separate niches in the market. And yet, I think it's undeniable that a lot of the stuff that we're seeing coming out for World of Tanks has been prompted by the popularity and the attention that War Thunder is getting. And I'm not saying Wargaming are worried about the exposure that War Thunder is getting, because the 2 games occupy different niches in the market. And again, a lot of the stuff that is that has been announced, if you like, in the latest ASAP video is something that Wargaming have been developing for a long time. It's not as if the game designers over at Wargaming have switched on YouTube one day and suddenly seen all of these War Thunder videos and thought, crap, quick, start developing something. No, that's not the case. The stuff that we're seeing in the ASAP video has been in development for a while. But it's funny how suddenly it's all being shifted into high gear, just as War Thunder Ground Forces starts getting a lot of exposure. Specifically, stuff like the historical battle mode, which they could have implemented with relative ease at any time in the last 2 years, but they just never bothered. And then suddenly this competitor appears on the market that's waving the realism flag. And suddenly historical battles become a priority for Wargaming. And it's like I've always said, the fact that we've got these 2 great games is it is nothing but good news for us, the gamers, because they're prompting the various different designers to, to raise their game. Wargaming cannot afford to just sit back and cruise on the success of World of Tanks. They have to keep innovating now, purely because War Thunder Ground Forces is there. And, to be completely fair to Wargaming, they haven't been sitting on their backsides for the last 2 years. We've got physics, we've got maps remodeled, there's new maps being introduced, there's all kinds of different nations and new tank lines that are being introduced. We've got team battles, we've got accurate representation of tank statistics now being displayed in the garage, depending on the equipment modules and crew training that we've got. We've got extra UI elements. We've got a combat record that's a lot more informative. There's lots and lots and lots of things beyond just the new tanks that are being introduced in every patch in World of Tanks. Lots of quality of life upgrades in the UI and in the garage in World of Tanks. That they're constantly upping their game, if you like. But I think it's undeniable that, particularly in the ASAP video, a lot of the stuff that they're suddenly waving the flag about is stuff that was definitely on the back burner, with not a lot of resources dedicated towards developing it until War Thunder Ground Forces reared its ugly head. And I think that's fantastic, because the only winners are going to be us. The fact that these two games exist, even if they're not, well, they are directly competing against each other, because they're the only two games on the market that cover this kind of thing in anything like the kind of detail that you can see in World of Tanks and War Thunder, even if they're not exactly the same kind of game. But the fact that these two games exist is great news for us, the gamers, because of the amount of competition that is breeding the kind of innovation that we're seeing coming out of World of Tanks and War Thunder. So even if you are only going to play one of the two games, the fact that the other game exists is fantastic news for you, because the developer of your favourite game cannot afford to rest on its laurels, and they're constantly having to innovate and develop to try to keep ahead of the competition of the other game. You, as a gamer, cannot possibly lose out. I'm also constantly being asked, oh, Jingles, are you going to stop playing World of Tanks when War Thunder Ground Forces comes out? No, of course not. I play World of Tanks for a different reason than I play War Thunder. They're two different games. I don't see why they can't coexist with each other, and I am very, very happy that these two games exist to breed the competition and innovation that we're seeing coming out of World of Tanks due to the threat posed by War Thunder. And then, of course, we've got World of Warships and the naval section of War Thunder that's coming out. And I think that is going to be a lot more interesting to watch the development of than the air side or the ground side, for example, of World of Tanks, World of Warplanes and War Thunder. Because, well, War Thunder definitely took the lead on the aircraft. In my opinion, it is undeniably a better flight game than World of Warplanes. I really don't think much of World of Warplanes. But that's just my opinion. I know there are a lot of people out there who think World of Warplanes is fantastic, and there is nothing wrong with that whatsoever. If you're enjoying playing it, carry on playing it. Don't let my opinion sway yours. But Gaijin have the pedigree when it came to flight games. That's what they did for a long, long time. They're very, very good at it. So they had the advantage there. Then you've got War Thunder Ground Forces coming out, and Gaijin are definitely on the back foot where that was concerned. Right, they're going directly up against the most popular and wildly successful tank game in the world, World of Tanks. But the playing field is very level when it comes to ships, because that's not something that World of Tanks has ever done before, and it's not really something that Gaijin have ever done before. And they're both going head-to-head at more or less the same time. So that's something I'm going to be watching news for development of with very, very keen interest. Obviously, as ex-Royal Navy, I am going to be particularly interested in how the whole warship side of both games develops. And neither side is starting off with any kind of clear advantage as far as the whole naval side goes. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of approach they both try to take. I would expect, because it seems to be what they are best at, for War Thunder's naval side of the game to, again, try to concentrate more on the realism aspect, and for World of Warships to be more arcadey, more of an instantly accessible pick up and play kind of game, because that seems to be the way that they, that's World of Tanks, that's World of Warplanes. But it's going to be really interesting to see, how they stack up against each other, because neither side is starting off with the background of experience that, for example, Gaijin have had with the aircraft and Wargaming have had with the tanks. It's a much, much more even playing field. So I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how the naval combat shapes up. Anyway, that's it for this week's Mingles with Jingles. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found stuff in there to think about and talk about in the comments down below. As always, take care on that battlefield, watch your six, and I will catch you next time.